and welcome to Haven Writers Guild. Today we are very excited to have Rachael Mead with us, a poet, short story writer, arts reviewer, bookseller living in South Australia. Rachael has an honours degree in classical archaeology, a master's in environmental studies and a PhD in creative writing from the University of Adelaide. Her poetry collections include The Sixth Creek, 2 chapbooks, and most recently The Flaw in the Pattern, which was published this year by UWA Publishing. Rachael, thank you so much for coming with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me. It's an honour.
I have so many questions I can't wait to ask you. I've actually got a big list of them, so make yourself comfortable. So first of all, congratulations on The Flaw in the Pattern, your latest book of poetry. Can you tell us a bit about it and the process of putting it together?
Well, I started it basically right on the heels of finishing my previous book, the Sixth Creek, The Sixth Creek was basically the conceit was that all of the poems would be written about the Sixth Creek catchment area, which is my home environment. So, and that took quite a bit of time, and by the end of it, I was so sick of writing the poems that were constrained to this really small area. So and it was part of my PhD, and so I got to I wrote all of those poems in a huge flood of creativity, but then was stuck with having to do the theoretical component of the PhD, which so all of my enthusiasm and drive was drained away, and so I'm a bit of a queen of procrastination. So suddenly all of these poems about, because I do quite a bit of travelling with my husband, so we'd been, there were various camping trips and those sorts of things that we'd been on, and then suddenly all of these poems kept coming. As soon as I sat down to write the theoretical component, suddenly more poems. So that's basically how it came about, is that I was trying to avoid doing other more difficult work.
So you really could have called it procrastination poetry.
Really, yeah.
The Flaw in the Pattern is nice to it. Beautiful. Okay, there's a quote on the back of The Flaw in the Pattern. And you are said to both argue and confide with yourself and us about the wild pleasures of Earth's physical and emotional topographies and of our responsibilities within all this. Which is just lovely to say.
It is beautiful. That was Jill Jones.
Oh, Jill Jones, okay. Yeah. Lovely, but that word responsibilities, our responsibilities within all this, kind of struck me. And I wanted to ask you, what do you feel are the responsibilities of being a writer?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I guess it's different for everyone, but when I'm writing poetry, I guess the things that really concern me and that intrigue me and that I want to write about are about humanity's relationship with the natural world. So I guess that's my feeling of responsibility is back before I started the PhD, I was working as an environmental campaigner, and I found that, it was the worst possible job for me because even though I was really passionate about the work, it involved a lot of arguing with people and trying to convince them, and for quite an introverted person, having to be so extroverted all the time and basically feel that it's your responsibility to convince them to change behaviours, change attitudes. I found it really, really difficult, and so when I moved away from that work, I still sort of had the passion of the activist, but had realised that through that work that people really don't like to be told what to do and how to think. And so activism, my activism, I had to come from a different place and sort of work on people a little differently. And so there's a lot of wonderful activist and political poetry out there that is that I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I'm already convinced. So. So if you weren't of that particular mindset, I'm not sure how well it would necessarily work, just because it feels like it's very sort of, table thumping.
Yeah.
And I found when I was working as a campaigner that as soon as anyone got a whiff of you being that very didactic, I expect you to change your behaviour and think this way, then the walls go up and and it's not particularly effective. So with poetry, I thought that I would try and weasel around it a different way, and by writing poetry which talks about the natural world and basically just notices aspects of ecology and interconnections and details, and because I think we're especially when we're living in urban and suburban environments, we can feel very cut off from nature, even though urban and suburban environments are environments, but we have that sense of nature is out there, and so we don't have anything to do with it, and so it doesn't, our actions don't matter. Whereas so with my poetry, that I guess that's what I'm trying to do is through noticing detail, talking about connections, talking about emotional responses to environments, to try and generate, in the reader a feeling of identification, like, oh yeah, I noticed that. I understand what she's talking about, because that's exactly how I feel when I notice those sorts of things. And so, and by building up that sense of knowledge. It's through knowledge that we sort of, it's really hard to care about something that we don't understand. So that's what I guess what I'm trying to do is build up a sense of knowledge about something, and then hopefully that grows into care, and then hopefully love, and the willingness to fight to protect it if it's threatened.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So, that's, I guess, and that's what sorry, to get back to your original question, I guess that's what I feel is my responsibility as a writer.
Fantastic. Now, I was going to ask about what you feel are the responsibilities of Australians as stewards of our environment. Do you feel like you've kind of answered that? I think we probably crossed over a little bit.
I think we have, sorry.
So no, that's good, that's fine. We can just go on to the next then. There's a poem in the book called The Flaw in the Pattern, and one of the lines of that poem is, and you're talking about wilderness here, this is the home of a new genus of silence, a place where travel is tectonic grind, weather is never trivial, and the present is the flaw in the pattern. There is so much in that is just, we could talk about, but that idea that the present is the flaw in the pattern, I really want to know what that means to you, what you're talking about in that.
Well, what I'm getting at is that we've entered an era at the moment where that people have started calling the Anthropocene, which is an era in which humans have dominated the planet to the extent that we are we're changing ecological and geological processes. So that's so, and so many of these changes are not particularly good for our ecological health. And so I'm sort of trying to tease out the point that we are animals, and that we are just one species amongst many, but we've basically, through our actions, created such an impact on the non-human world, on non-human species and ecological systems that that we're a detriment to the planet. So the present being the flaw in the pattern. I'm sort of talking about the past and the billions of years that the Earth has existed as a planet. That we have, the ecological processes have carried on without any problems, and they're self-sustaining, self-generating. Whereas now humanity, through deforestation, overfishing, or basically there aren't many environments that we haven't had a detrimental impact on. So that's sort of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, thank you. All right, shifting focus a little bit. Writers' Week 2018. You were one of the featured poets. Can you tell us what that was like?
Yeah, it was exciting. I've got to say, it's a real honour to be asked. I've been, I love Writers' Week.
Me too. To hang out for that.
It was such a wonderful event. That Barbara Kingsolver was
Mem
here.
Fox was there. That was just incredible.
Yeah, there were so many fantastic sessions. So to actually to be invited to sort of to step beyond the velvet rope and be one of the one of the people on the stage was a great thrill, and it was pretty. I was pretty nervous, I've got to say. But
I heard you did beautifully. I wish I could have been there for that, but no, I didn't.
You can't get to everything. It's exhausting.
It is. You almost need a tent on the lawn and just camp out the whole week. Yeah. One of your poems, Katitanda, Lake Eyre, was used as the basis of a choral composition by Stephen Leake, and it was performed by the Young Australian Voices Choir at the St Peter's Cathedral.
Yeah, they're amazing.
I watched the video online. Oh my goodness, it gave me goosebumps. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, that was all of the combined choirs together.
Wow.
They're so talented.
Yeah. How did that come about? Are you acquainted with Stephen Leake, or?
No, that's just one of those things that's a wonderful offshoot of the great poetry community that we have here in Adelaide. That somebody had heard that a composer wanted some work.
Wow.
And put out a call to some people, and then so a bunch of us sent poems in to Stephen Leake, and he just happened to. I mean, I don't think that I write with any particular rhythm. I certainly don't write anything that rhymes. So I was thinking, the chances are very, very slim, but you've got to be in it to have a go.
That is a very lyrical poem, and Katitanda, it's got a beat of its own too. That just the phrase, Katitanda.
Yeah, that's
true. Wow, that's beautiful. And you were one of the poets at Festival Fleurieu in 2017, which was another one I wanted to get to but didn't. And you've got an upcoming reading at the Yankalilla Library on the 19th of April, which is next week, I think. So is the Fleurieu Peninsula a particularly special place for you, because you seem to have quite a lot to do with that region, or is that just coincidence?
It is actually just coincidence. I just happen to have been asked. But I grew up in a house with my grandparents because they were sort of growing up in the 20th, raising their family in the 20th century, and it used to be a very common thing for families from Adelaide to, over the summer, go down to Victor, and they would hire a shack and just spend the summer holidays down there, and that's so I used to spend summers with my grandparents and sort of aunts and uncles and sort of big extended family down there. So it does have it is a very special place to me. We always used to spend time over the summer around Horseshoe Bay in Port Elliot.
Beautiful.
And just really and so I do love it down there, but it's just sheer coincidence that I've been asked to do a couple of things down there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and it's funny because it sort of has this sense of being over there somewhere, but it's actually not that far away from Adelaide or from where we are.
And the friends that I have that live down there are always rubbing it in about how much better the weather is so good down there. When we're sweltering here, it seems to be gorgeous and much cooler and sea breezes and
my parents have just gone down for a few days down there on holidays, so
lovely.
I'll have to go and visit them. Okay. One of the things that we've been talking about a little bit at Haven is this Instapoet thing that's happened, where we've got Instagram now and poets are flocking to publish their poems, so to speak, online through Instagram. Have you had much to do with this whole Instapoet thing? Because you've got an Instagram account, have you?
Yes, but just for for photos.
Yeah.
So I'm so out of the loop. I had to swiftly Google Instapoet. And so I don't. I'm not subscribed to any of their feeds or anything. But as soon as I realised what it was that they're doing, I thought, I'm behind this. What a great thing.
There's a bit of a contentious issue with it, because there are some sort of critics that are saying this isn't poetry, it's just moody adolescents that are putting all their feelings on a page and calling it poetry, but there's no structure and there's no, technique there, and it's, this really sort of harsh analysis of this poetry. But I'm kind of with you. I think it's actually a beautiful way of getting people excited about poetry again. So
I agree. It's and if people, it seems very democratic as well.
Exactly.
Because there's no gatekeeper there saying this is good, this is not good.
And getting poetry published is hard work.
It is, and it can be really demoralising. And you have after the first couple of rejection letters, that can be really crushing. So I think that it's if it's getting people excited about poetry and just looking at the world through a poetic lens, it sounds great.
Absolutely cool. Now, you've done an honours degree in classical archaeology, which immediately piques my interest.
Era ago.
Yeah. What led you to deciding that's what you initially wanted to do? And do you think there are still elements of that filter through to your writing?
Yes.
Excellent. Next question.
But it's so embarrassing. It also shows how old I am. Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Look, I've always been fascinated with history, especially ancient history, and but when I was in school, I was always Mum was very you can't have a career in the humanities. You'll never make any money. I hope she doesn't. Sorry, Mum. So I was always steered towards science, whereas that's not where my passion lay. And then when I went out after school, I went to work for a little while, and then decided, well, if I do want to go to university, I might as well do something that I'm truly passionate about. And so that's why I chose classical archaeology, even though, job prospects, I wasn't thinking in a particularly practical way. It was just completely following passion. And as part of that degree, they insisted that you had to do an ancient language. So it was either Latin or ancient Greek, and I couldn't decide, so I did both. Not at the same time. Good Lord. But it was and the studying of ancient Greek and Latin it really does help you with language, because you understand the etymology of so many of the words that we use, and studying any foreign language is excellent for your grammar as well. Even though I still I've got one of the poetry groups I'm in. There's one of my friends is excellent on grammar and is always picking up little bits and pieces where I'm just losing losing it. But I do look back on that time as being very, very important in generating a love of language.
Wow, that's amazing. And then you went on to do your Masters in Environmental Studies?
Yeah, that was me getting a little bit more practical because, it's... so still passionate about the subject, but the job prospects were better.
Yeah. What did you actually focus on for your Masters?
Dog poo.
Okay, excellent.
It was a course that was part coursework, part thesis, and so the coursework I specialised in biological conservation, and for the thesis I looked at urban ecology, and my thesis was on the impact and benefits of keeping dogs in urban environments.
Okay.
Yeah. So and of course dog poo is that's how that came into it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, there was a lot of quizzing people about their practices on what they did with their their dogs' leavings. That's not I'm not in a hurry to revisit that topic.
That's well. I'm sure it's an appreciated insight though, because we all have to. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. What do you say about that? Yeah.
All right. So you're obviously, saying you're passionate about the environment is probably an understatement, but. This year, do you have sort of things that you particularly focus on in your writing year to year? Is there something that you're thinking about this year in terms of the environment?
This year, marine environments and plastics and marine pollution, and then just the things that are always I'm always concerned about in terms of deforestation, habitat loss, and climate change. The big one, which is it's just one of those enormous problems that and we seem to have a ridiculous population of climate deniers, so it's which I find incredibly frustrating. It's one of those situations where the science is overwhelming, but there are when the media constructs stories around climate change, there's this idea that you have to give people equal time, sort of for and against, whereas and so people, and so that particular structure makes it seem like, there are lots of climate deniers around, but there aren't very many of them. They're just very loud, and so sorry, I will rant on about that for quite a while if given the opportunity. But it's it is difficult because it's such an enormous and global problem, but it's also in many ways invisible. So it's when it comes to activism and advocacy, it's a difficult one to tackle because we need coherent plans around it on a global level, and that's always the challenge.
Wow. Okay. All right. In an interview, that interview with Mike Ladd on ABC Radio, you referred to a quote by Patrick Kavanagh: "To get to know even a small field is a lifetime's exploration." And your comment was that it would be lovely if people could, what you were saying earlier about looking at their immediate environments and seeing the micro and the macro going on around them all the time. And I was listening to that and I was thinking, do you feel like that's something that poetry can do, that it can actually cause people to pause and observe what's around them and draws their attention to something that they otherwise might miss?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the beauties of poetry and I think just literature in general. That it's a way of not only bringing our attention to things that we might not necessarily notice, but the act of looking at the world through other people's eyes is an exercise in empathy, and I think that's that empathy is something that we need a lot more of in the world. It's a key basically to getting along as a civilization, and also it's key to being able to understand the perspective of other species as well. I mean, I'm not saying that we can necessarily think in the way that other species think, because we're humans and we have language, and so we think in particular ways that and we've got no idea how other species communicate. But I think that just the active imagination of trying to put ourselves in the paws of a fox or in the wings of an owl or something, it's that's a really good way of being of just practicing empathy.
Yes, interesting. Because I was, what you were saying before, sorry, I've had a brain pause. I was just thinking, you said earlier that literature, particularly political and environmental activistic literature, can be quite confrontational. But your poetry and others sometimes can be quite gentle. And I think sometimes that can be more impacting almost, because it bypasses that wall that people put up and allows to communicate a message that may otherwise not be heard. So I think it's really valuable what you're doing with using poetry to communicate something that you care about in a way that is actually probably going to have a more effective reach than it may otherwise have. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to Rachael Mead for sharing her amazing journey with us. To find out more about Rachael's poetry and photography, go to rachaelmead.com. We'll also be posting links to where you can buy Rachael's great poetry. And check back in next week, because we'll be posting up Rachael's recommendations of amazing literature and books that have inspired her. We'll see you soon.